June 6, 1944, D-Day. The 3rd Canadian Division storms ashore on Juno Beach, straight into Hitler's vaunted Atlantic Wall. Will they find glory or a grave? And who is this soldier? And why is it important that he survives? Find out today as we refight this pivotal engagement of the Second World War. Not again. Hello, I'm Bruce. Welcome to the basement. Canada entered the Second World War on September the 10th, 1939, 1 week after Britain and France had declared war on Nazi Germany in response to Hitler's invasion of Poland. Ottawa's late declaration of war might have been to show our independence from London, or because we were waiting for the arrival of a shipment of armaments from the United States, whose laws forbade the sale of weapons to combatants at the time. But there was never any question that Canada would once again fight at Britain's side. Canada's soldiers had earned a fearsome reputation as shock troops in the First World War. The Canadian Corps was widely considered to be the finest formation of its size on the Western Front, though the Australians might disagree. But between the wars, the Canadian Armed Forces had been reduced to barely 4,000 men, lacking any of the equipment necessary to fight a modern war, especially tanks. Just as in 1914, Ottawa was faced with the task of creating a modern army out of a nation of farmers, fishermen, lumberjacks, miners, ranch hands, and store clerks. These citizen soldiers would be expected to fight against the Wehrmacht, the best army in the world. At first, Canada's citizen soldiers did not fare well. The 1st Canadian Division was chased out of France by the Wehrmacht, along with the rest of the British Expeditionary Force, in June of 1940. The 2nd Canadian Division suffered a disastrous defeat at the hands of the Germans again, in August 1942, during the bloody raid on Dieppe. In between, 2 regiments of Canadian infantry were defeated and captured by the Japanese at Hong Kong in December 1941. It would not be until the landings in Sicily and Italy in 1943 that Canada's soldiers began to win back the reputation earned by their fathers in the First World War. But the veterans of Sicily and Italy would not be the troops chosen to take part in the Normandy invasion in June 1944. This role was given to the untested men of the 3rd Canadian Division and the 2nd Armoured Brigade. The plan for the invasion was for the Allies to land on 5 beaches on the coast of Normandy. The Americans would land on Omaha and Utah beaches, the British on Gold and Sword beaches, and the Canadians on Juno Beach. Our game today is based on the landing on the sector of Juno Beach codenamed Nan Green, in front of the town of Courseulles-sur-Mer. The attackers will consist of A Company of the Regina Rifles, commanded by Major Duncan Grosh, with a small squad of engineers to clear obstacles. The Regina Rifles were descended from a number of militia regiments that had been raised in southern Saskatchewan in the 19th century. They were nicknamed the Johns because of the number of Farmer Johns in their ranks. About 20% of the men came from the various First Nations living in Saskatchewan, principally the Cree, Stoney, and Dakota, and the Métis. Armoured support was provided by the 1st Hussars, raised as a militia cavalry unit in London, Ontario in the mid-19th century. Elements of the regiment had fought in the Boer War and the First World War. It was designated an armoured regiment in 1941 and received actual tanks in 1942. The Hussars were issued Sherman duplex drive tanks, tanks that could swim to shore, in April 1944. Paul, Allen, and Howard will be playing the Canadians in today's game. Their objective is to capture all the German strongpoints so that the follow-up waves can come ashore. Each player will command a platoon of A Company, the Regina Rifles. Paul and Howard will also each have 2 Shermans. In addition to his platoon, Allen will have 1 Sherman, the company command section, and the engineers. He will also have an officer in the 13th Canadian Field Artillery Regiment, who landed with the Regina Rifles that day. If the Germans kill him, it won't really have any effect on the game, but they will be able to claim a moral victory, or since they're Nazis, an immoral victory. Rod and Eric will play the defenders from the German 716th Infantry Division. Their objective is to hold the beach, but as that will be very difficult, their real objective is to give the Canadians a tough fight by inflicting lots of casualties. The 716th was a static division, meaning that it lacked the transport normally available to a Wehrmacht division, and was comprised of older soldiers. However, the defenders of Nan Green were well trained and well equipped. In addition to their weapons, they have the defences of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Stakes were planted in the water, some tipped with mines, to tear the bottoms out of the Allied landing craft or blow them up if they hit the mine. Log ramps were also placed to tip over any landing craft that hit them. A variety of concrete bunkers were also placed on the beaches to house cannon or machine guns to fire at attackers as they came onto the beach, or to fire at the flanks of Allied tanks as they came ashore. Other steel or concrete obstacles were built to further impede landing craft if they came ashore at high tide, or to obstruct tanks if they came ashore at low tide. Mortars were placed in tubercle emplacements to rain down fire on attackers as they came ashore. All of these defences are modelled on today's table, together with belts of barbed wire. The Germans will have 4 squads of infantry, 3 medium machine guns, 2 50mm mortars, and an off-table 105mm gun. My D-Day set doesn't exactly model any actual sector on the landing beaches, so it's not a faithful representation of Nan Green on Juno Beach, but it will have to do. They also have 2 75mm anti-tank guns and an 88. As Rod and Eric survey the beach, they have every reason to believe that the attackers will receive a hot welcome as they come ashore. The rules we will be using today are bolt action. It's the first edition because I'm old school. In the scenario, the tanks will land first, followed by the infantry. They will land widely separated because of the need to avoid obstacles and defensive gunfire. Paul will concentrate on the west or right edge of the table and assault the 75mm bunker. He will then turn the German flank. Alan will land in the center, and Howard will land on the east or left end of the table. They will demonstrate to tie the Germans down, and they have to move fast because the tide is coming in. On the first turn, the Germans must deal with the effects of the naval bombardment. On a roll of 1, 2, or 3, a German unit will start with a down order to show that they are still sheltering from the bombardment. Unfortunately for the Germans, and crucially for the Canadians, one of the units that is suppressed by the naval gunfire is the 75mm gun on the western end of the beach. The game begins as the Canadians come ashore. First to land are 5 tanks of B Squadron, 1st Hussars. Luckily for Paul, his 2 tanks have drifted and land together. Howard has landed right in front of the 88 emplacement. Rod fires and hits Howard's tank. Now he must roll to penetrate. In bolt action, you must roll equal to or higher than a tank's armor to penetrate, with higher being better. A Sherman has an armor value of 9, and the powerful 88 allows the player to add 7 to his die roll. However, Rod rolls a 1. With a final result of 8, the shell miraculously bounces off the Sherman's armor. Paul shoots a smoke round from one of his Shermans, and manages to land it right in front of Eric's bunker. Unless the smoke drifts or disperses, this will effectively neutralize the position. However, the firing slit on the model allows fire from both sides as well as frontally. I hope Paul doesn't try to flank the bunker. Paul's other tank drives forward and takes out a section of barbed wire. This will make things much easier for the oncoming infantry. Howard fires at the Germans in a trench with one tank, then advances with the other, getting out of the arc of fire of the 88 emplacement. On turn 2, the landing craft carrying A Company of the Regina Rifles comes ashore, and the Canadians hit the beach. Paul's tank sprays Eric's infantry with machine gun fire in an attempt to suppress them. Rod's 88 fires at Howard's Sherman again. Again he hits, and when he rolls to penetrate, he rolls a 6. 6 plus 7 is 13, 4 more than is needed to penetrate Howard's tank. so Rod gets 2 rolls on the penetration table. Howard's tank is blown to smithereens! Howard's troops are the first to disembark. He is followed ashore by Paul's platoon, who follow the tanks. Allen then comes ashore in the center. Everywhere, the landing craft are disgorging their troops. But there's nowhere to hide on the beach, and the Canadian players inadvertently let slip that if the Germans kill one particular figure, they will win an immoral victory. I haven't told the Germans that, but now Rod and Eric will spend the rest of the game trying to win their immoral victory. Eric fires his 75mm anti-tank gun in the bunker hidden in a house, and hits Allen's tank. With a +6 to its penetration roll, it destroys the tank. The defenders open fire with everything they have. Mortars rain shells down upon the Canadians. The infantry in their trenches open up with small arms and LMGs. Medium machine guns fire from the pillboxes. The sniper picks his targets from the attic of the German command post. Allen's infantry spread out to tie down the maximum number of German units, but in doing so, they draw down the maximum amount of German fire. Paul is moved around to the side of the besmoked 75mm gun. Eric is able to pivot the gun in its bunker and fires. Paul's tank is knocked out. Paul implements the Allied plan and forms up to assault the bunker. In bolt action, bunkers are almost impervious to fire, but they can be taken by assault, which simulates grenades being tossed into the bunker and small arms shooting through the firing slit. Paul's section goes in. Both sides fight, but the Canadians are better troops, and there are more of them. The first bunker has been taken. Meanwhile, Paul sends another squad to attack Eric's infantry in the trench. Though he takes losses, the Germans have been badly shot up, and the trench is taken. On the Allied left, Howard assaults the German 88 bunker. It too falls. Allen has been having a tougher time of it in the center. His middle squad has 7 pins on it. In bolt action, every time a squad is hit, it gets a pin marker. Pins can be rallied off, but if the number of pins exceeds a unit's morale, then the unit is removed. The Canadians' morale is 9, so 3 more hits and the section is gone. As hits occur on a roll of 3 or better, this section is hanging on by its fingernails. Allen decides to try an assault on the German trench in front of him. Because he has pin markers on him, he will have to pass an order test to get his men to go. That means he has to roll 2d6 and get equal to or less than his current morale. His initial morale was a 9, but he has to subtract every pin marker from that, which means his morale is now 2. Allen has to roll Snake Eyes. And Sergeant Allen rolls Snake Eyes. All pin markers come off during an assault, so with stirring words, Sergeant Allen gets his boys moving. Allen's section storms the trench, incredibly suffering no casualties from the Germans' defensive fire, and kills or captures all of the defenders. I think that's worth a Victoria Cross. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. At the same time, Paul sends what's left of one of his sections against a pillbox to the rear of the bunker and trench system he has just taken. The MG-42 inside guns down a number of his troops, but in the end, it falls. Allen turns his attention to the last German trench in the center. With German strongpoints falling all around it, the German defenders are in trouble. Allen launches his attack, and the trench is taken. However, he now finds himself caught below an MG-42 in the pillbox to his right, and a 75mm gun in the house in front of him. Howard advances against the last German trench system, but it means he has to cross a lot of open ground. Rod opens up at him, and Howard's squad is pinned. Luckily for Allen, Paul captures the pillbox with the MG-42. The way is now open for Allen to assault the house. Unluckily for Allen, the German 105mm gun that is off table finally gets a hit. Rod has been firing and missing with the gun all game. He initially needed a 6 to hit, but the 2-hit number got lower every time he fired on the same target. He didn't need to roll that well this time, so of course he rolls a 6. Allen's section is destroyed. German MG-42 fire kills the Canadian commander, Major Grosch. The rest of his command section is wiped out at the same time. The only figure not killed is the mystery artillery officer, whose morale breaks and he plays dead for the rest of the game. Nevertheless, the Germans have not technically killed him, so they do not win an immoral victory. Hauptmann Grote decides that the situation is hopeless and flees his command bunker for the relative safety of the town. Allen charges the 75mm bunker in the house. More of his men drop, but enough survive to take out the gun. In the meantime, Paul advances on the deserted command bunker. Hauptmann Grote's plate of breakfast is still warm on the table. Strudel. Howard sends a squad against the last German position to take the pressure off his squad that is pinned down in the open. At this point, it is clear that the Canadians' plan has worked and they have won. The Germans have put up a stiff fight and have given the Canadians a tough time. The Reginas have suffered almost 40% casualties, and the 1st Hussars have lost 3 of their 5 tanks. But as the game ends, thanks to sheer guts and a bit of help from the 1st Hussars, Nan Green is firmly in the hands of the Regina Rifles. So, who was this mystery Canadian artillery officer that the Canadian players had to protect? None other than actor James Doohan, Scotty from Star Trek. Doohan landed with the second wave of the Regina Rifles on D-Day. During the fighting, he shot 2 German snipers, but was himself shot 6 times in a friendly fire incident. 1 bullet hit him in the chest, but fortunately bounced off a silver cigarette case he was carrying in his breast pocket. Another bullet shot off one of his fingers. Throughout his acting career, Doohan always hid his right hand from the camera. The 1st Hussars were the only Allied unit to achieve all their D-Day objectives. One of their tanks that landed on D-Day, named Holy Roller, was one of only 2 Canadian tanks to survive the whole campaign in Northwest Europe from D-Day to VE Day. And as the 1st Hussars will be quick to tell you, Holy Roller came ashore first. By nightfall on June 6th, the North Nova Scotia Highlanders of 9th Brigade, 3rd Canadian Division, had advanced farther inland than any other Allied formation that landed on D-Day. Canada's citizen soldiers had breached Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The liberation of Europe had begun.
Then swell the song, both loud and long, till rocks and forests quiver. God save our King and heaven bless the Maple Leaf forever.
Thanks for joining me in the basement. Until next time, may your dice always roll true.